with that, I'm going to pass it off to the keynote. I'll give a quick introduction. We'll pass it off to you, Ms. McNeil. But I'd like to welcome Ms. Ha McNeil, former Chief of Staff of Transportation Security Administration. While at TSA, she oversaw strategy, policy coordination, innovation, public affairs, and legislative affairs, and worked to secure private-public partnership authorities for TSA. It's my pleasure to announce today that Ha has recently joined Panjim, a security solution company reinventing travel around the world, as the Chief Executive Officer for Panjim's strategic consulting business. Ha leverages Panjim's commercial and government mission-driven experience to deliver innovative solutions for a diverse range of clients. Prior to Panjim, Ha was the Chief Operating Officer at BSA, the Software Alliance, where she oversaw revenue-generating licensing and compliance programs for the organization, driving $40 to $50 million in annual sales to BSA members. Ha is a seasoned national and homeland security professional who has spent over a decade at the Department of Homeland Security and the White House, driving whole of government policies on topics including trade, supply chain, and transportation security, and commercial unmanned aerial systems. It's my pleasure. Please take it from here, Ms. McNeil.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Just want to make sure you guys can all hear me.
Yep, it's perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Well, Jordan and to the entire Plug and Play team, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really thrilled to be joining you all, especially in this new role of mine at Panjim. So what I thought I would do today is to tell you a little bit about Panjim, and then delve into kind of some contextual remarks on the challenges that we're facing today in the travel industry that we're all, very aware of, and what considerations we need to think about as we move forward, and how tools like digital health passes can really be a facilitator in those efforts. So Panjim Strategic Consulting is not your typical consulting firm, and we are able to draw on decades of private and public sector experience to really craft solutions for our clients that are innovative and comprehensive. And we are able to leverage in-house software and hardware capabilities, as well as a technology scouting line of effort. That, combined with our deep policy and operational experience, gives us the ability to really offer end-to-end service to our customers, from concept development to solution design, all the way through to delivery. And we serve a broad range of clients, from government agencies to airports to associations. And we have a really deep network of relationships and a reputation in the industry that is unparalleled. If you look at the Panjim roster of team members, it's really a group of people who are problem solvers and who thrive in a challenging environment to provide solutions that make the world a better and more secure place. So for me, it's a really exciting time to be joining this company because we all know that the travel industry has been really hard hit by the pandemic. And as we collectively think about how to recover from that and how to restart travel, there's a real opportunity here to reimagine travel and make the right investments to really take the travel experience to the next level. And the team at Panjim has a tremendous level of experience that it can bring to bear to solve this challenge and really position us for future opportunities. So about the challenge today. As I mentioned, and as we're all aware, the travel industry has been extremely hard hit by the pandemic. And as the industry thinks about how to reemerge from the crisis, it should think not just about recovering to pre-pandemic levels, right, but really to take the opportunity to reimagine the future of travel, make the right investments and transformations to propel the industry forward. So a few statistics on how the travel industry has fared under COVID. Globally, international arrivals declined by 74% compared to 2019, so in 2020. So that represents a loss of approximately 1.3 trillion in export revenues, which is more than 11 times the loss recorded during the 2008-2009 financial crisis. In the United States, travel spending declined by 42%, that's nearly 500 billion, between 2019 and 2020. And international travel was a large part of that, right, falling by 76%. Recent analysis shows that 4.7 billion fewer passengers are forecast to travel by year end 2021 compared to the projected baseline. So that's a loss in revenue of more than 94 billion US dollars by the end of 2021, which cuts in half expectations compared to the projected baseline. So obviously, there's significant pressure to reopen travel and to come together and figure out how to do that. It is really critically important that governments develop a plan to implement sustainable and scalable processes for lifting restrictions and enabling safe travel while safeguarding public health. And it's going to require a coordinated effort across jurisdictions and international organizations. Internationally agreed standards that restore confidence with the traveling public is absolutely necessary. And as Jordan mentioned, there are a range of initiatives being rolled out by governments, the EU COVID Green Card, and the new plan that the UK has just announced that offers a color-coded tiered system, as well as industry efforts like the IATA Travel Pass. But to date, there is no internationally recognized and agreed standard for the collection and verification of health status. And we see a patchwork of approaches that have different levels of effectiveness and efficiency and different levels of use of technology. So for example, at a certain point in time at London Heathrow, travel was at 10% of normal volumes. And there were manual systems in place for reviewing health status that were creating wait lines of 4 more hours. And obviously this is not sustainable, especially as we see an increase in demand for the recovery of travel. And to demonstrate the state of international travel requirements, as of mid-March, 4 countries required a vaccination certificate as a condition for exemption of quarantine. 6 countries required vaccination certificates as a condition for exemption of testing. 25 countries required a combination of tests before and or after arrival, and 63 countries required quarantine upon arrival. So as you can see, there is very much a need for the international community to come together on standards. And fixing this global challenge is the #1 priority for the global travel industry, for individuals wanting to travel again, to the global business and supply chains, and more broadly, balancing the need to reopen economies while safeguarding against further waves of infection is the #1 challenge faced by governments worldwide. So it's important for all relevant parties, government, industry, and stakeholders to come together and define what a path to recovery and travel of the future looks like. In doing so, policymakers and industry need to focus on what elements need to be in place for travelers to decide to travel again, because at its core, the question that needs to be tackled is, what will it take for people to feel comfortable and decide to travel again? And the way I think about that is in 4 different buckets, right? The first one is a sense of safety and security. That differs between individuals, but it's probably some combination of having a sense that being around others won't expose them to undue risk. Vaccines make people feel safer. The ability to test and have test results come back in a timely manner is another measure, and physical measures like mask wearing. Any combination of that can help with a sense of safety and security. Then travelers need to have a clear understanding of what is required of them when they travel. So what steps do they need to take? What information do they need to share? And what are the differences in requirements depending on where they're going and where they're coming from? The third bucket is the ability to actually meet those requirements, right? Can they actually get the vaccine? Can they get tested? Are they able to show the proof necessary to meet those requirements? And then the fourth bucket is the traveler's willingness to actually meet those requirements. Do they have options? Will anything be held against them? Is the system flexible enough to accommodate their needs? And is their privacy protected? Do they have control of their information and how it's being used? So rebuilding traveler trust is a critical underpinning to their decision to travel again. From the Pangeum perspective, we think that a solution to that has a few critical components. The first is health security. right? Enabling the protection of travelers' health through a secure end-to-end journey by adhering to governmental requirements. The second is safety, a solution that puts safety at its heart to protect customers and colleagues. The passenger experience, maximizing a seamless experience for travelers and helping them deal with disruption and uncertainty. Passenger trust and confidence, building trust and confidence in travel through support and clear communication. A risk-based approach, striving to mitigate risk as far as possible and taking a very pragmatic approach that zero risk is not achievable. And data security, that gets back to individual user privacy and disclosure rights. So digital health passes, which obviously is the topic of today's event, and other tools are being developed, and we have a real opportunity here to help and facilitate the reopening of travel. And it's important to think about the principles that these tools should adhere to so that they are broadly applicable and meet the users where they are, right? Are they adaptable to varied circumstances and requirements? So a few things to keep in mind, I think, as tools are getting developed. One is, are they facilitating? They should be making things easier, right? So tools really should be designed with the aim of facilitating the travel experience. Are they secure and legitimate? And so when I say secure, that goes from physical security, like, do they offer a touchless experience, for example, to cyber secure? Legitimate, meaning that parties have confidence in the authenticity of the information being conveyed. Is it transparent and easily communicable, right? Is it clear? Is the information being conveyed clear and easily understood? Is there a good user interface for that? Is it interoperable? I think there's going to be a promulgation of tools, and I think Jordan mentioned that in his opening remarks. That interoperability is really important. How do the tools operate in a wider ecosystem? Is it adaptable and flexible and risk-based? So as we've seen, the situation, it's constantly evolving, so tools need to be adaptable to changing circumstances. Governments are changing requirements frequently by the day. Considerations also evolve, right? From rates of community spread to the introduction of new variants, vaccine penetration rates, testing regimes. So the tools that can bring together these different data sets and considerations to offer a dynamic assessment of risk will be very helpful to the recovery of the industry. Accessibility and equity is really important as well, and is something obviously that has come up in the last few weeks quite frequently, that the tools themselves should not present a barrier to people to re-embark on travel. So does it have to, again, back to the point, does it have the flexibility to meet people where they are? Whether that is a digital method or a paper documentation, right? We have to have different ways for people to access travel. And then the last one comes back to, individual privacy. I think when people think about whether they want to meet the requirements that are in place to re-embark on travel, they're going to want to have a sense that their health and other data is protected and they actually have control over how it's being used. So we're seeing some current efforts, some best practices across the board. Governments are rolling out frameworks. As I mentioned earlier, some of the wellness pass collaboratives are putting in line and building out things that really do adhere to some of the principles that I've highlighted above. Aligning with government requirements, integration with broader capabilities, combination of digital and physical documentation allowances, and privacy adhering. So I think a lot of people are out there trying to do the right thing. And at this point in time, it's really important for governments to bring the parties together and work to define a really clear path forward to restarting travel. Just to bring it back to Pangeam, we are in the business of solving the seamless travel challenge. Obviously, health is a really important and timely part of that. How we build something that will solve the broader seamless travel challenge, as well as address the current day challenge, a health challenge posed by the pandemic, is something that we're actively engaged in. And so with that, thank you again for having me, and I'll turn it back over to you, Jordan.
Great, thanks, Ha. So I do have a few questions for you that actually come off of things you mentioned, but I think the first one would be, there's a lot of different efforts going on, lots of tools, initiatives being developed around health passes to facilitate travel. What is bringing all these like efforts together? Is there, or does there need to be a common denominator?
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned, we're seeing the emergence of certain governments and entities trying to, set up international standards, but there hasn't really been a consensus around that. And so at this point in time, I think it's really critical for that to happen. ICAO came out with recommendations, but really, governments themselves also need to come together. And you can look at that in different ways, right? And so there's different approaches to it. You can look at travel corridors and, at least restarting in some sense uh, on travel corridors that make sense, or, where the demand is. But we need to start somewhere.
Yep.
And really, and from the US perspective, I think the US government really does have a convening role to play in that, to set expectations, clear expectations with the industry and the traveling public.
And then with your experience, like what are some best practices? Do you think like developing bubbles between countries is going to be the first step, or like historically, what would you say has worked?
Yeah, so I think, I think one does not preclude the other, right? So I mentioned travel corridors, that's one way to approach it, but that doesn't preclude the need for us to define how more broadly we will restart travel, right? So I think we can run those efforts concurrently. Again, I mean, the best practice really is clarity of messaging, both to other governments and partners in the ecosystem, but really to the traveling public, right? Because at the end of the day, it's an individual's personal decision on whether or not they're gonna, buy that ticket, get on the airplane. That's what's gonna restart and really lead us to the road to recovery.
Right. Got it. Okay. And then my last question, and congrats on the new role again, but as the new CEO of Panjim Strategic Consulting business, like what role do you see Panjim playing in all this?
I think it's a really, great time for us to have an impact in this space. As I mentioned, we're in the business of solving the seamless travel challenge, which, I really think is going to take the travel industry to the next level. We have the right expertise to be in this space. And so, as solutions, are developed across the board, I think there's a real role for us to work with our clients to, kind of knit together what an end-to-end solution looks like overall.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much for being here and for the speech. And I'm looking forward to seeing everything you guys are able to do this year.
Thanks for having me, Jordan.
Thanks, Ha.